The first time I said the word open out loud, it came out like I was testing the temperature of bathwater with my toe. We were standing in our kitchen in socks, a Tuesday night kind of quiet, the dishwasher humming like a patient witness. Alex had just finished rinsing a plate, and I had my hands wrapped around a mug I wasn't even drinking from, just holding for something to do with my fingers. Our house looked like every other house on our street. Clean counters, a bowl of lemons we forgot to eat, a calendar on the fridge with too many obligations and not enough joy. I don't want a divorce, I said, because it felt important to get that part down first. My throat tightened on the word like it was a cliff edge. But I don't want to keep pretending I'm not me. Alex dried his hands slowly, like he was buying time. He looked tired in that way that isn't about sleep. You mean the bi thing? He said, quietly, like it was a medical condition we'd been managing. I nodded. I'd told him I was bisexual when we were dating. He'd taken it in with the earnestness of a good guy who didn't want to be the kind of guy who freaked out. He'd said, okay, and kissed me. And it had seemed like enough. Except okay can mean a lot of things. For years it meant, I love you, and I hope this part of you doesn't require anything from me. I loved him so much it had almost worked. But there's a particular ache that happens when you keep choosing the same sacrifice. It starts to feel less like love and more like self-erasure, dressed up as commitment. I'd reached a point where I could either tell the truth and risk losing him, or keep the peace and risk losing myself. I mean all of it, I said. The part of me that wants to be wanted by women. The part of me that misses. The way it felt to be seen in that room. Not just in our room. Alex leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, and the movement was so familiar, it made me want to backpedal. He didn't yell. He didn't scoff. He just got very still, like his body was trying to decide whether the ground was stable. What are you asking for? He said. I took a breath that went all the way down. I'm asking if we can open our marriage. He blinked. Once, twice. Are you asking to sleep with other people? I'm asking for freedom, I said, and immediately wished I'd chosen a softer word. Freedom sounded like the opposite of him, like he was a cage. His jaw flexed. And what do I get? He asked, not cruelly, but honestly, like he was trying to locate himself in the new map. You get me, I said, but more honest. That was when he looked at me, really looked, and I saw fear in his eyes that didn't look like anger. It looked like the fear of a man who had built a home and could suddenly imagine the roof lifting away. I can't handle details, he said after a moment. I'm not one of those guys who can hear about it and be fine. I don't want to know what you do. I don't want to picture anything. I don't want... He swallowed. I don't want it in my head. I felt a strange relief at how clear it was. Okay, I said carefully. We can talk about boundaries. And that's how we landed in what we started calling, half joking and half desperate, parallel play. Like two kids in the same room building separate towers, we'd be open, but in separate worlds, no play-by-play, no sharing, something like don't ask, don't tell, but kinda. Don't ask, don't tell, lite. We made rules the way people make sandbags when they see a storm coming. Safer sex, always. Testing schedule. No co-workers, no mutual friends, no bringing anyone home. No overnight stays at first. We set up a shared calendar and agreed we'd mark nights as out or in with simple colours. Blue meant I was going out. Green meant he was. Yellow meant date night for us. We didn't even call them dates. We called them plans, like that made it less intimate and therefore less dangerous. I don't want to hear about it, Alex repeated, like a mantra. Not what you did, not what you said, none of it. What about feelings? I asked, because the thought of swallowing everything made my chest feel too tight already. He hesitated. I can handle general, he said. Like, you had a good time, you're safe, you're home, that kind of thing. I nodded. Okay. We shook on it in the hallway like business partners. Then we went to bed and held each other too tightly, as if we could squeeze the change back into the bottle. At first, it worked in a way that made me suspicious. I downloaded an app with my heart pounding like I was doing something illicit even though we'd agreed. I made a profile with a photo that looked like me on a good day. I wrote married, ethically non-monogamous and stared at the words until they stopped looking like a confession and started looking like a fact. The first time a woman messaged me, just a simple, "Hi, you're gorgeous," I had to sit down on the edge of the bathtub because my knees went weak. I met her, Mara, at a wine bar that smelled like cork and citrus. She was 36, wore gold hoops, and laughed with her whole chest. She asked good questions. She didn't treat my marriage like a red flag or a fetish. When she touched my hand across the table, my body lit up like a house after a blackout. Nothing about it was graphic or chaotic. It was tenderness, adrenaline, that dizzy feeling of being in your own skin again. I came home that night buzzing, cheeks warm from the cold air and the possibility. Alex was on the couch watching a documentary, with the volume low. He looked up, and for a second I saw the question on his face. Then he swallowed it like we'd agreed. "You okay?" he asked. I hung my coat slowly, trying to put my energy away like a bright scarf that didn't match the room. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay. It was nice." He nodded once, eyes on the TV. "Okay." I waited for more, something like curiosity, or jealousy, or reassurance. Instead, there was only the quiet agreement we'd built. I went to the bathroom, washed my hands, brushed my teeth, and looked at myself in the mirror like I was checking whether the night had left visible marks. In bed, Alex pressed a kiss to my forehead. His hands stayed careful. His voice was soft. "Good night." I told myself this was what we wanted. Freedom, without the pain of details. The arrangement was a compromise, and compromises are supposed to feel a little uncomfortable. I told myself the discomfort meant it was working. The next few weeks had a rhythm that almost felt normal, if you didn't look too closely. Blue nights for me, green nights for him. Sometimes he just went out for drinks with a friend. Sometimes I didn't ask. The not asking became its own habit, like leaving a room when a certain song comes on. We were polite. We were functional. We were two people trying very hard not to step on the invisible wires between us. But the thing no one tells you about open but separate is that silence isn't neutral. Silence fills itself. If you don't put truth in the gaps, your worst fears will do it for you. For me, the silence started to feel like loneliness. Not because Mara wasn't kind, she was. Not because I didn't have fun, I did. But because my life had a new emotional room in it, and I had no place to put what happened there. The thrill, the tenderness, the grief that sometimes came right after. The strange guilt that clung to me like perfume. I had to come home and pack it all away before I walked into my own house. One night, Mara and I kissed outside her car, the streetlight turning her hair into bronze. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was slow, careful, both of us checking in without words. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine and said, "You look like you're holding your breath." I laughed, but it came out thin. "I kind of am." "Does he know you're happy?" she asked. I opened my mouth and realised I didn't know how to answer. Alex knew I was safe. Alex knew I was home. Alex knew there were blue nights on the calendar. But did he know my heart had cracked open in a way that felt like sunlight? "I'm not supposed to share," I said finally. Mara's expression softened. "That sounds hard," she said. "Not sharing is still a kind of intimacy, you know, a kind of agreement. But it can get lonely." I drove home with that sentence sitting in my passenger seat like a quiet passenger. Inside, Alex was already in bed, scrolling on his phone, the lamp casting warm light on his face. He looked up and smiled like he was trying to be normal. "You're home?" he said. "Yeah," I said. "Everything okay?" I climbed into bed and let the covers fall over me like a curtain. "Yeah," I said again, but my voice betrayed me. Too flat, too practiced. He turned off his phone. He hesitated. "Did you have a good time?" he asked, as if the question itself was a risk. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say I felt alive. I wanted to say I missed this part of myself so much I didn't realise how hungry I'd been. I wanted to say I still love you. I wanted to say all the things that might have connected us. Instead, I said, it was fine. Alex nodded, and I watched him accept fine like it was a safe substitute. He rolled onto his side. His back was a wall I had helped build. That's when I realised we weren't just avoiding details. We were avoiding intimacy. We were using secrecy as a coping strategy. On Alex's side, the silence did something different. It didn't make him lonely. It made him imaginative, and not in a good way. When you give anxiety an empty room, it redecorates with nightmares. It showed up in small ways at first. He started asking questions that sounded like logistics, but carried an ache underneath. "What time will you be back? Are you driving? Did you eat?" He began checking the door lock twice at night. He'd pick at his cuticles until they bled. He started going to the gym more, not with joy, but with that grim determination some people use as armour. One Sunday morning, I found him at the kitchen table, staring at the calendar on his phone. The sunlight was bright, making everything look too exposed. He didn't hear me come in. "Hey," I said softly. He looked up like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "Hey, you okay?" He nodded too fast. "Yeah." I sat across from him. I could see it then. How tired he looked. How his eyes had a distant, alert edge like he was listening for a sound that wasn't there. "Talk to me," I said. He let out a long breath through his nose. "I don't want to hear details," he said immediately, as if he thought I might dump them in his lap. "I know," I said. "I'm not trying to." He rubbed his palms against his jeans, a nervous gesture I'd seen the first year we were together when he was trying to impress my friends. "It's just..." He searched for words, and didn't find ones he liked. "When you don't tell me anything, my brain fills it in, and it's always worse than whatever the truth is." My stomach sank. "What does it fill in?" He shook his head, eyes fixed on a spot on the table. "I don't want to say it out loud." "Alex," I said gently, "I can't fix a ghost I can't see." He swallowed, and his voice came out small. "I imagine you falling in love. I imagine you laughing with someone the way you laugh with me, but more. I imagine you realising I'm the boring part of your life. I imagine you coming home and pretending, and I'm just..." He stopped, jaw tight. "I imagine being replaced." Something in my chest broke open. Not with anger, but with grief at how alone he'd been inside that fear. "I'm not trying to replace you," I said, and I reached across the table. He didn't take my hand at first. Then he did, slowly, like he was testing whether touch was still allowed. "I know," he whispered. "But I don't know, because we made the rule that we don't talk." We sat there holding hands over the kitchen table like teenagers, as if we were learning each other again. That afternoon, we went for a walk around the neighbourhood. The trees were bare, branches like nerves against the sky. We didn't talk much at first. The crunch of gravel under our shoes made a steady sound that kept me anchored. "I thought minimal information would protect me," Alex said finally. "I thought if I didn't know, I wouldn't picture it." "And?" I asked. He gave a short laugh with no humour. "Turns out my brain is a filmmaker." I squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry," I started, then stopped myself. The apology tasted automatic and useless. "I don't want you to suffer," I corrected. "I don't want you to feel like you're in the dark." He nodded. "And I don't want you to feel like you can't be you," he said. "I see what it does to you when you come home and try to shrink yourself back into a box." I looked at him, surprised by how accurately he'd named it. "I feel like I'm living two lives," I admitted. "And I can't bring the emotional parts into this one. I can't tell you when something was meaningful, or confusing, or when I felt scared. I can't share the big feelings, and it makes me feel like I'm cheating emotionally even when I'm not." He flinched at the word cheating, then steadied. "So, what do we do?" he asked. We stopped at a corner where the street opened into a small park. A kid was pushing another kid on a swing. Their laughter carried easily in the cold air, uncomplicated. "I think we need to change the rules," I said. My voice shook, but it didn't break. Not to full details, not to play-by-play, but some tell. The stuff that helps us feel connected. The stuff that keeps you from imagining the worst and keeps me from feeling alone. Alex frowned, thinking, "Like what?" "Like feelings," I said. "And safety, and boundaries, and check-ins. Like, I can say, 'This person matters to me,' without describing what we did. I can say, 'I'm feeling vulnerable,' without you needing to know why in graphic detail." He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding a weight. "I can handle feelings," he said. "Feelings are human." "And you can say what you're afraid of," I added. "Without me labelling you as jealous or insecure. Without either of us acting like your fear is a character flaw." He nodded, eyes glossy. "Okay," he said. But I need guardrails. If I start spiralling, I need a way to stop. We walked home with a new agreement forming between our steps. That night, we sat on the couch with a notebook like we were building a small bridge by hand. We made a list called Some Tell. It wasn't romantic, it was practical, and it felt like intimacy. We decided on 3 questions we'd ask each other after an outside night, no matter whose night it was. Are you safe? How do you feel? What do you need from me right now? We agreed we could share emotional highlights. I felt seen. I felt nervous. I felt respected. I felt a little sad afterward. But we'd keep descriptions of physical things off the table unless one of us specifically asked, and the other consented to answering. We agreed we could name people we were seeing more than once, so they weren't faceless shadows. We agreed that no was always allowed, even mid-conversation. We wrote down no apologies for having needs and underlined it, both of us, like students. And we added something that surprised me, a weekly check-in on Sundays, coffee in hand, phones away, where we talked about us. Not just logistics, us, desire, fear, gratitude, anything that had been building. The first time we tried it after a date, my heart hammered harder than it had at the bar with Mara. I came home and found Alex in the kitchen making tea. He looked up, and the old tension flashed across his face. Then he took a breath and straightened his shoulders, like he was practicing courage. Are you safe? He asked. Yes, I said, and I meant more than physical safety. I'm safe. How do you feel? He asked, voice steady but careful. I swallowed. This was the moment that would either connect us or confirm why we'd chosen silence in the first place. I feel good, I said slowly. And I feel tender, like my emotions are out in the open. Alex nodded, absorbing. He didn't ask for more. He didn't look away. What do you need from me? He asked. I surprised myself by crying. Quiet tears, not dramatic, just release. I need you to hold me, I said, not because I did something wrong, just because I'm a lot right now. He set the mug down and came to me, and when he wrapped his arms around me, it didn't feel like he was clinging to keep me from leaving. It felt like he was welcoming me back into the marriage with the parts of me still intact. I can do that, he murmured into my hair. A week later, it was his green night. He came home later than usual, cheeks flushed from cold air, smelling faintly like cologne he rarely wore. My stomach twisted with a jealousy that felt juvenile, and I hated myself for it. Then I remembered what we'd underlined. No apologies for having needs. He walked into the living room and found me on the couch, trying to look casual and failing. He smiled a little, tired but present. Are you safe? I asked, and my voice softened around the words. Yeah, he said. I'm safe. How do you feel? He hesitated, then sat beside me. Nervous, he admitted, and kind of proud that I did it without panicking. He looked at his hands, and also guilty, like I'm doing something wrong even though we said it's okay. I nodded, because I knew that feeling well. What do you need from me? I asked. He looked up and his eyes were unexpectedly vulnerable. I need you to tell me you still want me, he said. Not just as your husband on paper, like in your body. The honesty hit me like warmth. I moved closer, took his face in my hands and kissed him. Not frantic, not performative, just a kiss that said, I'm here. This is us. When we pulled back, he looked almost relieved. Thank you, he whispered. The weeks turned into months. We didn't become perfect. Sometimes Alex still spiraled, especially on nights when I was out and he couldn't sleep. Sometimes I still felt lonely, especially when something beautiful happened with a woman and I wanted to tell my best friend, my husband, and couldn't tell it all. But the difference was that now we had a language for the loneliness and the spiraling. We didn't have to pretend they meant the arrangement was failing. They were just feelings, information, weather passing through. On one Sunday check-in, Alex admitted something that made my chest ache. I realised I was using don't tell as a way to avoid feeling, he said. If I didn't know, I could pretend it wasn't real, but it was real anyway, and the pretending made me more scared. I reached for his hand. I was using it too, I confessed. I was using secrecy to avoid the guilt. If I didn't talk about it, I didn't have to see it reflected in your face, but then I was alone with everything. He nodded, thumb rubbing over my knuckles. It's weird, he said softly. I thought openness would pull us apart, but the way we're doing it now, it's making us more honest, more intimate. I laughed through a sudden sting of tears. Who knew communication would be the kink, I said, and he snorted, and the sound felt like relief. The biggest change wasn't in our calendar colours or our rules, it was in our ordinary moments. Alex started reaching for me more often in small ways, hand on my back as I passed, a kiss at the sink, a text in the middle of the day that said, "Thinking about you." I started telling him the truth about my inner life, not just the part related to being open. I told him when I felt insecure at work, when my mother's comments got under my skin, when I missed my younger self, when I felt proud of my own courage. He listened like a man who had finally realised that knowing me was not a threat. One night, months after the kitchen conversation that started it all, we lay in bed with the window cracked open to cool air. The room smelled like clean sheets and the faint lavender lotion I used when I wanted to feel calm. Alex turned toward me and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," I said, and meant it. He swallowed. "When you're with a woman, do you feel like you're more yourself?" The question landed with weight. It wasn't fishing for details. It was a question about my soul. I took a long breath. "Sometimes," I said carefully. "Sometimes I feel like parts of me wake up, parts that have been asleep. But it's not because you're lacking. It's because I'm multiple. And I used to think I had to choose which part deserved to exist." Alex's eyes softened. "And now I'm trying to let all of me exist," I said. "And I want you in that. I don't want to do it away from you." He nodded, and his hand found mine under the covers. "I want that too," he said. "I don't need the movie in my head, but I want the truth that keeps us connected." I turned onto my side, face close to his, and the closeness felt different than it used to. Not tighter, not possessive, but spacious, like we'd made room for more truth instead of less. "You're not replaceable," I told him, voice steady. "You're my home, not the kind of home that traps me, the kind that lets me come back with my hands full." His eyes went bright. "And you," he said, "are not too much." We held each other then, the way we used to in the early days, without the guardedness, without the quiet bargaining. The irony didn't escape me. The more we stopped using secrecy to cope, the more intimate we became. Not because openness is magic, but because honesty is. Because naming the fear out loud shrinks it. Because sharing emotion doesn't poison love. It feeds it. Later, as the room darkened and the streetlight outside drew soft shapes on the ceiling, I realised the word parallel play no longer fit. We weren't in separate worlds anymore. We were in the same world, building two towers side by side, sometimes handing each other blocks, sometimes stepping back to admire what we'd made. Not a perfect structure, not a simple one, but ours, sturdy enough to hold all the parts of us we'd once tried to hide from each other, and finally kind enough to let them breathe.